I really like The World of Darkness. I've been reading The World of Darkness since I started reading when I was a kid. I always found it a very human universe, even though the universe is very famous for its creatures, setting, and story. Hunter the Parenting is looking like something very special, and I think it has a very good future. Today, I'll be talking about the possible routes the show is taking and what has happened, along with some lore bits that I think will help us better understand the story of Hunter the Parenting. Spoilers for episode 5, by the way. So, if you haven't seen episode 5, I highly recommend you to go do that. You're supporting the animation team over there, and that's really cool because that means more episodes for us. So, go do that. I'll still be here talking and stuff. Today, I will be mainly speaking about werewolf and vampire related issues to the plot. I think that's going to be what we see for at least a few more episodes, and the setting of both Hunter the Parenting and the setting of World of Darkness and how it ties together. Now, everything I could say could be wrong. I mean, I'm human after all. Now that I've said everything I need to say, let's start off with who is Matilda? Or what, at least what we know about her to be factually true, or mostly true. Number 1, she was the maid for the Arcanum for at least a few months. Number 2, she really likes spitting. Number 3, she could have killed everyone if she wanted to. Werewolves usually fight way scarier stuff than a few humans. And lastly, she kidnapped Marcus. Now, in general, werewolves in the World of Darkness are usually some sort of flavor of extreme eco-extremists that very often fight the little things of nightmares, and they usually lose. The werewolves that fight like these crazy, scary, terrifying things that you would only see in horror movies, they lose. They often lose. And werewolves aren't weak, they're insanely dangerous. To give everybody understanding of how strong Matilda is, she would have mopped the floor with buff Piotr. It would have been the equivalent of putting a kid that just learned how to walk in a cage match with a trained fighter. They would have stood no chance. They would have died. If she really wanted to kill everybody there, she could have. But she doesn't, which is very abnormal for an average werewolf. Matilda exercises restraint while in Krynos form, which is the classic werewolf form we see in most media. It takes very high willpower while in this form not to do anything that isn't extreme violence. In fact, most werewolves tend to call the Krynos form the war form. And while she still had some ill manners while in human form, she was nice sometimes, and she made a real effort not to turn everybody there into pink mist. The fact that she didn't immediately kill everybody helps us a lot and tells us more about who Matilda is. Most werewolves don't like human society. They're humanity's number one haters, but some tolerate them at least. Well, more than others. The werewolf population is split into smaller societies called tribes. Sort of like how the vampires, the series has been focused on, have their own society/clans they come from. Werewolf tribes are spread throughout the world. Each one sort of works like a micronation. And just like in real life, a lot of these times, these tribes don't get along. A lot of them will actively fight against each other or will try to disadvantage one another. Werewolves usually don't work together to a bigger purpose. There are a few times which they do, but for the most part, they do not. And like Dee said,
some of them go on the computer. And in my experience, those ones are typically far better adjusted.
Of all the werewolf tribes, there's only a handful that really interact with humans the most. And the two tribes that interact with humans the most are the Bonars and the Glasswalker. Due to the possible knowledge of computers and her ability to at least tolerate and act somewhat normal while still maintaining a human job, which is kind of a big deal in werewolf culture. The fact that she was in an urban place for such a long time, possibly months, tells us a lot. The first tribe being the Bonars. I'm gonna just quote the wiki here. Freedom and practicality rule above everything else when it comes to the Bonars. Most Bonars are extremely savvy when it comes to surviving in the streets. No other tribe is as accomplished at urban fighting as Bonars, and surprise is considered their primary tactic. They are looked at by many other tribes as lower class and not worthy of much respect. They tend to live mostly in urban areas / rural. They tend to stick near where humans live, like city parks, corner of cities, rural towns. They are a tribe that have core values like freedom, practicality, and democracy. They usually don't strive to be like the next tribe we're going to talk about. The Glasswalkers are business werewolves. That's not some funny joke. Part of their tribe is literally dedicated to just business. They value science and technology. I mean, their tribe symbol is literally a skyscraper. Glasswalkers are the most intertwined with human society. They tend to work very well paying jobs or high status jobs like lawyers, scientists, businessmen, etc. While some Bonars in opposition might be, for example, a maid. These two are the tribes where she most probably belongs to. In my opinion, I think she is a Bonar just because most Glasswalkers wouldn't be working as a maid, and they would usually be much deeper in the city. We see Matilda here being right next to the woods when she breaks out, and this is what Yarmouth looks like on Google Maps. While, for example, a Glasswalker might live in the heart of London, it's just not part of their style. She's most likely a Bonar. These are prerequisites of the ghoul. The ghoul has been a ghoul for a few years now. Kevin has proof of this. Kevin knew about the ghoul before he even joined the Sabbat. So it goes, he was inducted into the Tremere and the Camarilla. He was at some point told about the ghoul there, or learned about it. Then he left. He said he's been running from the Camarilla for years, okay? And the ghoul has been a ghoul for that long, and it's been at the chapter house for that long. Somehow the ghoul knew about the secret spot for the hunter data, which was pretty well hidden. It was hidden in a globe that I think had a fingerprint detector, a fingerprint reader to open the globe, and the data was stored in there. How would anybody know that? It's a pretty good hiding space. So this means this ghoul must have known about it. Let's go down the list. I don't think Brock is the ghoul because he's too new. Grimmel supports this claim in the publishing audio log when she says she doesn't recognize him. The only people that recognize him is Marcus, Elise, and Harry. And then later on in episode 4, Spit supports this, saying he also got recently hired. So Git, Spit, and Brock can't be it. Occam is not the ghoul. It doesn't make sense because Dee and Remold both agree due to his solar sorcery, it makes him inherently harder to be dominated. And if he was the ghoul, he could have just told Dee to go away in chapter 4 and not deal with him at all. It just doesn't make sense. Next, Remold. At chapter 4, we see him in the pub with Git, Brock, and Fatigue while Occam is performing the ritual. And it's not Remold. It doesn't make sense either. And then Fatigue. Now, I know a lot of people say Fatigue might be the ghoul, but I really don't think so. This guy is a very long-lived hunter. He's fought all sorts of crazy stuff. It doesn't make sense for now in his twilight years for him to just suddenly decide to be a ghoul. From what we gathered from Fatigue, it doesn't make sense. He seemed like a pretty good person in my opinion. We also see in the pictures that Fatigue progressively gets older and it starts to affect him physically. In the last picture, we see him walking with a cane, which in the previous 2 pictures he didn't. If he was ghouled, it would reflect physically, but it doesn't. And then Amanda. Amanda's not the ghoul. It just doesn't make sense. I'm not gonna explain that one because I don't want to. I see an argument for Dr. Waters. However, I also don't think that. There's just a lack of proof supporting this claim. The main 2 suspects, in my opinion, are definitely Grimmel and Elise. Now, there's a lot of proof for this. In chapter 4, we see a lot of clues that tells us that it might be one of them. I'm going to start with Elise. Elise stole cigarettes and keys from Git and his wallet. That's already a pretty suspicious thing to do when you've been told there is a ghoul actively amongst you. So that's already pretty suspicious. Then she gives it to Grimmel. She gives all these things to Grimmel. She gives the cigarettes, the keys presumably, because we see her later in the episode in the security room and she needs access for it. So that's how she probably got access to it, keys. And then immediately after the map we see of chapter 4, we know that Matilda got the cigarettes at some point, or the joints or whatever. This is pretty important and I didn't catch this until I watched it for like the 20th time. We see Matilda smoking openly, by the way. She's not hiding these cigarettes. They're right next to him, in fact. And Kitten and Amanda is there. When Kitten leaves, we see Elise putting on a new hairband. That means that Matilda has already gone to Grimmel and gotten the cigarettes somehow. I don't know how yet, but we know that's already happened. And we know they're different hairbands because they change color. In the beginning of the episode, she has this color. And in the second episode, she has a different color. That same hairband from the start of the episode is on Grimmel's hand. That's pretty suspicious. Oh, and in the map, Elise is listed as walking down before we see this. It says Elise was walking down from the second floor, and that's when she was changing her hairband because of Kitten coming out of the kitchen. That means the only people in the second floor at that time were Grimmel and Elise. And you know what else is the second floor? The Arcanum, where Occam got choked out. Lastly, Grimmel. There's a lot of proof telling us Grimmel is probably the ghoul. It's not looking good for her. Let me rephrase that. I think there's a lot of proof that Grimmel is definitely the person that choked out Occam, but she might not be the ghoul. But that chance is very, very low, because I think there's a very, very high chance of Grimmel being the ghoul. Throughout episode 4 and episode 5, Grimmel constantly makes these really suspicious faces whenever vampire knowledge and ghoul knowledge is discussed. And I don't think that's normal or a coincidence that the animators and the voice actors had these two things show up at the same time while watching the episodes. I just think it's very, very suspicious that she constantly diverts her gaze to the left or right, or she scrunches up her face in a really abnormal manner. Or maybe she can't tell them because of some unknown X factor, and she is an unwilling hostage that has, been told to not say anything or else. We also have to remember how addictive vampire blood is. Chapman says when he injected contraband drugs into his body to help with his withdrawals, it had no effect.
I don't think you understand. I am a freak. I will kill again. And I will literally blow up the constabulary for even the smallest possible pint of Vitae.
This school's probably in a blood bond, so that means that it would be extremely difficult for Grimmel to say or act upon her more human instincts to not do evil stuff. She could have died multiple times in the show. She survived a hit from Matilda, and how we've already discussed, werewolves are super, super strong. That means that she took a hit, got launched through the wall, broke the wall, then landed in the floor. Then Matilda came over and put her weight on Grimmel. That's probably a lot of weight, since she probably broke a few ribs already. And then Matilda tries to kill her. She's been very, very lucky. And she's been taking an abnormal amount of punishment for a human. So maybe she's not human. I definitely think that Grimmel did choke out Occam, though, because she has burns. Grimmel has a record already of crawling through the vents, so she could have known where the hunter data was stored if she peeked through the gates. She suddenly gets a burn in the same night that Occam used his solar witchcraft, which causes sunburns, according to Remold. And she was one of the only two people in the second floor during Occam's attack. There's just too many clues telling us that it's Grimmel. It's too much evidence against her. Now, maybe we'll learn something in the future that tells us she's not the ghoul, but I will definitely say that she is probably, she's definitely the person that choked Occam. There's too much proof. I want to add that I also don't think it's Elise. I think Grimmel beats Elise in the guilty factor just because Elise was so honest. I think she's not the ghoul because she had a chance in the episode to choose not to be a suspect, and she decided to tell someone that she was not there. I don't think a ghoul would ever do that. Why would a ghoul ever do that? That goes against their own wishes, maybe, and the wishes of their vampire dude or vampire, against their master. It just doesn't make sense. So I think it's Grimmel. Why would a blood bonded ghoul put itself in a position that it can get caught like Elise did? That doesn't make sense. One last thing that we need to keep in mind is what Marcus saw when he used the Oculus Imperium. He saw with his golden hunter vision, he saw two symbols, a triangle with two lines and a square with a circle in the middle. Now, these are symbols used in game by different hunters to classify or write down messages. For example, one could be werewolf or vampire or help or whatever other thing. It could be to classify someone or a specific verbal command. The weird thing is that in the wiki, there is no symbol for ghoul. There are symbols for werewolves and vampires, like I said earlier, but there isn't for ghoul. So what's the next best thing? Maybe the triangle we see in Marcus's vision with 2 lines means puppet, while the square with the circle in the middle means danger. This could fit the definition of ghoul. There is no specific written symbol for ghoul, but it could also fit a dominated person. But I'm leaning towards ghoul because we already know there's a ghoul there. I haven't really seen anyone talk about this online or in the comments, but we know the route Matilda took to the pub at the end of chapter 4. In chapter 5, we get a brief glimpse of the proof. We see Marcus look at a finial that looks broken. I had originally thought it was a result of this. But we see proof that this isn't the case in this frame. That means Matilda walked up from the first floor to the pub and locked the door behind her and did her deed and escaped through the secret closet passage. Then she went to the security room and possibly used her werewolf powers to corrupt evidence. Some werewolves have the ability to do this. Side note, how tragic would it be if the reason she killed Fatigue was because Kitten told her that the ghoul would likely result in her being fired, so maybe she thought, might as well do it. I'm gonna get fired anyways.
Think it will cost me my job?
It might.
Let us pray.
I don't know if this is important at all, but I just thought it's something somewhat important that might be useful in the future. If you don't want to listen to a stranger make baseless claims, now's the time to click away. I'm going to talk about very deep speculation that might not be true just because there isn't enough evidence for it. TLDR, werewolf magic is referred to gifts in World of Darkness lore, since they're usually learned through spirits. What are spirits in the World of Darkness? I think I know what sort of magic Matilda has. We visibly see her claws get longer, which matches this gift learned through a bear spirit, which we see behind her. We also see her turn her head at the bird on her shoulder and look back at her attackers when the bird is done speaking, which leads me to believe this is the gift she's using, which matches the description perfectly. Lastly, the spider. This one, I'm not so sure about, just because it could be a lot of different things. But if I had to guess, I would pick this one. All the other gifts Spider teaches, like the Spider Spirit teaches, are combat related. There are a few that aren't, but they don't really match. I think it's the Tether gift because the werewolves are looking for Shuck, so I wouldn't be surprised if they came back to steal information, maybe this time by force, since they've been discovered now. This kind of leads me into another tangent. The ghoul's going to tell everything to the Regent. That means that the Regent will most likely learn about Kevin's ID, which is shown publicly multiple times throughout episode 4 and episode 5. The potential implications might lead to a blood hunt or something similar. Vampires hate information about them being so public. Another thing I want to touch upon is the tunnels in chapter 1. Since I am a total nerd about this setting, I'm going to make an educated guess and say those tunnels are a result of Black Spiral dancers. Warning. Super warning. Dancer lore is filled with super messed up topics. In my opinion, it's borderline too much in some cases. So now's the time to leave if you are easily disgusted or just don't want to hear like nasty things. So essentially, Black Spiral Dancers are a tribe of werewolves trying to actively destroy/corrupt the world. Some of their favorite pastimes include swimming in nuclear waste, violating basic human rights, and working for a generic evil giant company. Because the majority of the werewolf population will kill them on sight, they have lived underneath the earth since their conception, where they have maze-like tunnels to travel around the world. They also occasionally work with the Sabbat in the lore, but I don't know if that will transfer into Hunter the Parenting. One thing I'd like to close off with is just how good the ending of chapter 5 was. The music, the animation, the voice acting, the plot. I thought it was very, very good. Very, very awesome. Definitely worth at least $1 in the Patreon for their work. Very, very good. Super good, in fact. Anyways, thank you for watching. I had a lot of fun making this. I really want to hear others' opinions and thoughts in the comments below. So if you have anything to say, please let me know.
Damnation. The third eye opens. His sweat will feed and warm her gullet.